Hello, fellow travelers. Tonight, we drift back in time to the 15th century, to the salt-kissed city of Venice, where lanterns sway above the canals and the scent of saffron and seawater lingers in the air. You're not just visiting, by the way. Tonight, you are a merchant from the Coromandel coast of southern India, arriving after a long voyage across monsoon winds and desert ports. In your hands, indigo, spices, silk, and stories whispered in many tongues. Life here flows to the rhythm of tides and trade. Markets glitter with glass and silver. Deals are struck in candlelight, and every step in this city of stone and water carries the echo of another language, another dream. So as you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy time traveling with me. Leave a comment with your location and local time. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, let the air grow quiet, and allow your breath to fall in time with the waves. You've arrived in Venice, and the city has been waiting. By the 15th century, Venice was less a city and more a performance. One where every bridge, every warehouse, every spice-laden gondola played its part in a grand theater of commerce. Rising improbably from the saltwater shallows of the Adriatic, it had no farmland, no forests, and no natural wealth to speak of. Yet, through cunning, sea power, and ceaseless negotiation, it had become the beating heart of Mediterranean trade. The city's palaces leaned over canals like eavesdropping nobles. Silk, sugar, glass, coral, and books passed through its labyrinthine markets, their scents mingling in narrow alleyways. Merchants from the Levant, North Africa, the Balkans, and beyond came to barter and sell. Armenians brought carpets. Persians sold pearls. Greeks ferried wine and olive oil in wide-bottomed casks. Venetian traders, shrewd and multilingual, absorbed it all, redistributing wares across Europe or hoarding rarities for the luxury markets of Florence, Milan, and Paris. Among these goods, the most coveted often came from much farther east. India, especially the southeastern coast, known as the Coromandel, was a land that existed in Venetian imagination as a garden of impossibly vivid color and scent. Long pepper from Malabar, nutmeg and cloves via Malacca, cotton and silk from the Tamil lands. These were not just commodities. They were stories made tangible. And among all the items, indigo stood apart. A pigment so rich, so enduring, it seemed to carry the very essence of tropical soil in every grain. Direct maritime contact between Venice and India had not yet been forged. That would come with the Portuguese voyages at the century's end. But the trade routes were already alive, complex, and centuries old. Tamil and Gujarati merchants shipped goods across the Indian Ocean to ports like Aden, Hormuz, and Jeddah. From there, Arab and Persian traders moved them through the Red Sea, overland to Cairo or Alexandria, where Venetian galleys eagerly waited. And so, a Tamil merchant, born to the rhythmic chants of temple courtyards and the rustle of dyed cotton, might indeed find himself navigating the alleys of Venice. Tamil Nadu was a commercial titan. Its port cities had been linked to maritime trade for over a millennium, and its merchants traveled widely, forming diaspora communities across the Indian Ocean world. These traders were literate, guild-affiliated, and often multilingual, skilled in managing complex cargo and negotiating across cultural boundaries. The air is thick with salt and spice as your ship glides into the Venetian lagoon, under a sky still washed in shades of rose and pewter. It is summer, though the morning breeze carries a soft bite that curls around your ankles and clings damply to the folds of your tunic. You are dressed for both respect and resilience. A deep indigo cotton tunic falls to your knees, its edges hand-stitched with pale thread, and a linen turban, soft with wear, wraps your head in careful folds, its loose end tucked behind your shoulder like a whisper of home. Around your waist, a saffron-dyed sash carries the faint scent of turmeric, and silver anklets chime softly as you walk, marking each step with quiet certainty. You carry no weapons, only the quiet dignity of one who has crossed oceans to trade stories, color, and spice. The city appears slowly, first a blur of spires and chimneys, then lace-like balconies, and finally the worn faces of stone buildings staring back at their own reflections in the water. You lean over the railing, fingertips brushing the coarse hemp of the mooring ropes, still wet from the long crossing. The lanterns lining the harbor flicker like tired stars, paling now in the growing light. Somewhere beyond the mist, bells toll faintly, churches waking up. Behind you, the crew stirs and stretches, still salt-stained and half asleep, their movements rustling like silk as the ship prepares to dock. It had taken months to reach this city of canals and chiming bells. The sea had become a kind of prison and a companion. Days blurred into one another, marked not by hours, but by the roll of the waves and the tightening of muscles unused to stillness. You'd grown used to the creak of rope and the slap of sail, the endless horizon that offered no comfort, only direction. Some nights, the stars felt close enough to speak to. Other nights, they vanished entirely, swallowed by storm clouds and spray. You dreamed of land, not the idea of it, but the feel of it beneath your feet, stone that didn't sway, earth that held your weight. Even the damp wood of a Venetian dock would be a blessing. When at last the city rose from the sea like a mirage, your knees ached, not just from the voyage, but from the relief of nearing somewhere still. Below deck, your goods lie tightly bound and carefully arranged. Indigo cakes, wrapped in muslin, sit wedged between boxes of long pepper and turmeric. There are bolts of hand-dyed cotton and silk, their colors still sharp from Kanchipuram's vats. A sliver of sandalwood oil sleeps in a wax-sealed box, along with your most prized offering, a blend of cardamom and frankincense, measured and packed with quiet reverence. The dock is a stage of purposeful chaos. Ropes coil through the air, crates thud onto worn planks, and the dock hands shout over one another in quick, melodic Italian. You don't catch every word, but the rhythm of trade is familiar. Questions about weight, spice, origin. One man lifts the corner of a sack and whistles softly at the scent escaping the weave. He raises his brows in surprise. There's curiosity in his eyes. The customs officer examines your cargo with solemn ritual, running a gloved finger along the seams, pressing his nose to the faint trace of sandalwood that perfumes the cloth. But it's the wax seals he studies most closely. The red one from your Tamil guild, and the darker curling mark of your Arabic intermediary. He pauses just long enough to imply suspicion, then gives a small, reluctant nod. There's no comment, just a flick of the wrist, a signal to proceed. Not unfriendly, just practiced. You know the type, a man who's seen 1,000 shipments and only ever remembers the ones that go wrong. You step onto Venetian stone for the first time, amused at how many men have already tried to guess what you're selling. yet none of them know what it's truly worth. You step ashore, the creak of the gangplank echoing like a hinge in your story. The stone beneath your sandals is warm despite the hour, and the city stretches before you with no interest in modesty. Venice is waking. Gulls shriek above canal bridges. A woman with flour on her sleeves opens a shutter and begins humming. A boy, half asleep, watches your ankle bells glint in the light and nudges his companion. A stray dog begins following you, perhaps drawn to the scent of pepper in your satchel, or simply intrigued by the sound your bangles make. You become engulfed by the pulse of the city, just as the markets begin their quiet spectacle. A theater of scent and color, where smoke rises gently from simmering cauldrons and shadows lengthen beneath swaying awnings. Campo San Polo, at the heart of the quarter, is no mere square. It is a breathing, shifting bazaar of wonders where nothing is quite what it seems, and every corner promises a new kind of curiosity. The air is heavy with perfume and possibility. A basket of dried seahorses rests beside candied violet petals. Ivory combs carved with Chinese dragons sit next to mirrors framed in Ottoman brass. A man wrapped in silks from Aleppo whispers the price of a velvet pouch said to contain powdered pearls. You pause to examine a fan made of horn and dyed ostrich feathers, fluttering in the breeze like the wing of a resting bird. Voices overlap in a multilingual murmur, the song of the city. Arabic wraps around Venetian, dances with Greek, and melts into Armenian. It is the same trade tongue you've used in every port from Jeddah to Hormuz. Soft-edged, slippery, and just ambiguous enough to serve its purpose. You don't always need words. A raised brow here, a tilted head there, and the deal takes shape. At the Fondaco dei Turci, your wares have been logged and sealed away. Your blue-stained bundles of indigo, the golden powders of turmeric, the fragrant whispers of cardamom and long pepper. You left them under lock and key, watched over by a clerk who smelled faintly of ink and distrust. Yet here in the open, where silver glints beneath embroidered veils and spices tumble like treasure from burlap sacks, you feel at ease. Trade, after all, is not a transaction. It is a performance. Near the edge of the square, a crowd gathers around a man in a leather apron, blowing molten glass. He moves like a magician, coaxing shapes from fire. The orb he crafts is pale green and hollow, etched with the faint image of a lion mid-pounce. A child gasps. A noblewoman pauses mid-step, and even a priest peeks over his book to marvel at the work. The object cools into a delicate globe, bending the sunrise into shimmering ribbons. Everyone leans closer, as if it holds a secret meant only for those who truly see. Not far away, two men argue over a spice blend that smells of cinnamon and sulfur. A group of Turkish furriers unroll a leopard skin, startling a passing nun. A merchant from the Balkans hawks dried rosebuds as aphrodisiacs, his wink exaggerated and entirely unserious. You watch it all from beneath the brim of your linen turban. You are not in disguise, but you are an observer, a collector of impressions. Each sound and scent is something to remember. You smile, slow and genuine. The city is stranger than you expected. This city reveals itself in riddles, and the answers are always for sale. In the 15th century, Venice's markets pulsed with languages: Italian, Greek, Armenian, Turkish, Hebrew, and Slavic. But one tongue floated above them all: Arabic. Not the Arabic of scholars or imams, but a leaner, trade-hardened version. It was not just a language, but a shared code, a bridge between spice ships and silk chests, between goldsmiths in Cairo and pepper barons from Calicut. Arabic became the lingua franca of Mediterranean trade because of the vast and long-standing commercial empire built by Arab and Persian traders centuries earlier. Their networks spanned from East Africa to Indonesia, from the Red Sea to the Straits of Gibraltar. Ports like Aden, Basra, and Alexandria were not just stopping points. They were economic powerhouses where knowledge, contracts, and currencies changed hands faster than caravans moved. When goods flowed west from India, textiles, spices, perfumes, and pigments, they did so on ships owned or brokered by Arabic-speaking merchants. A Tamil trader looking to export indigo or silk would inevitably work alongside Arab shipping agents, navigate Islamic port authorities, and negotiate customs duties written in Arabic script. As these goods passed through Ottoman or Mamluk territories, Arabic remained the key to unlocking gates and warehouses alike. By the time such goods reached Venice, the language had traveled with them like a watermark. Venetian merchants, always pragmatic, learned just enough Arabic to haggle over coral or clove prices. Arabic numerals had already found a home in European bookkeeping, and documents arriving with Eastern cargo often bore seals and signatures in Arabic, proof of legitimacy understood across coasts. For a merchant like you, Arabic is not your mother tongue, but it is as familiar as salt in the air. You speak it fluently enough to earn trust, to make jokes, to sense deception in a pause. You may read it with the help of a guild clerk, or recite phrases learned in Gujarat, Aden, or Muscat. It is your shield and your passport. In Venice, a city that listens with both ears and eyes, Arabic allows you to become both stranger and participant, silent when needed, fluent when it matters most. As you navigate the vibrant maze of stalls and cobbled lanes, your indigo-stained fingers draw more attention than you expect. Among the clamor of haggling merchants and the scent of exotic spices, a figure steps forward. A man with cream robes faded by ink and time, his eyes sharp and curious. A leather satchel, heavy with scrolls and ink pots, hung from his shoulder. A quiet testament to a life spent chasing knowledge beneath flickering lantern light. Without a word, he gestures toward a narrow doorway, tucked between a spice stall and a glassblower's workshop. Intrigued, you follow him inside, leaving the lively market behind for the quiet hush of a scriptorium. The air is thick with the musk of ancient parchment and beeswax, punctuated by the flicker of lantern light that throws shadows over shelves lined with scrolls and manuscripts. The scholar's gaze returns to your hands, blue-streaked from your morning's work. It's not the accidental smudge of handling wares, but the deep, embedded tint of someone who knows the dye intimately, who has lived among its vats and fermenting leaves. A faint smile plays at his lips as he utters a single word, Nila. You pause, surprise flickering across your face. Here, in this foreign city, someone still knew the ancient Sanskrit name for indigo. He pulls a scroll from the shelf, its edges worn but words clear, and together you trace the lineage of Nila, a word carried like a precious seed along the trade winds from Tamila Akam to Alexandria to Venice itself. His fingers dance across the text, bridging languages, Sanskrit, Arabic, Greek. The story is one of journeys, of merchants and monks, colors and cultures interwoven across continents. Then he chuckles, tapping a scroll labeled in Greek. But by the time Neela reached Alexandria, he explains with a wry smile, they just called it Indicon, the blue from India. Simple, efficient, not nearly poetic enough, of course. Your shared conversation unfolds in smiles, nods, and occasional bursts of quiet laughter. He tells of Venetian guilds, wary of Indigo's rich blue, protective of their pale woad, and wary of this bold newcomer. You recount the alchemy of your craft, how leaves fermented in vats release their blue soul, how the process is an art as much as a science, and how this color is woven into your very identity. The scholar chuckles softly, recounting a local tale of a bishop who swore indigo stained not just cloth, but the wearer's very soul, a suspicion and reverence wrapped in one. You both know that beneath the politics and superstition lies a deeper truth. This dye connects worlds, its color a symbol of exchange and transformation. He offers you dried figs, their sweetness a gentle counterpoint to the heavy history laid between you. As you fold your indigo silk, warmth lingers not just in the cloth, but in the rare understanding shared between trader and scholar. A moment where past and present, east and west, mingle in the soft glow of a lantern-lit room. Indigo was more than a dye. It was a marvel of nature and chemistry wrapped in mystery. Extracted from the leaves of the Indigofera tinctoria plant, its transformation was an alchemical act. The process began with leaves dried under sun, soaked and fermented in lime-lined vats, and then beaten with wooden paddles until a green liquid foamed and settled. Only when lifted into air did the miracle occur. Oxidation turned green into a luminous, permanent blue. The preparation was time-consuming, pungent, and required immense skill, which made it all the more valuable. For centuries, this precious blue was cultivated in regions in South India, where dyeing and weaving were sacred crafts passed down through generations. There, indigo wasn't just commerce, it was ritual. It stained the robes of priests and dancers, colored temple hangings, and symbolized divinity in the form of Nila, a word that meant both blue and dark, invoking the hue of rain clouds, Krishna's skin, and the ocean's depths. From the Coromandel coast, indigo traveled westward in tightly wrapped cakes, exchanged in ports like Calicut, Aden, Cairo, and Alexandria before reaching European hands. By the 15th century, Venice stood as the glittering hinge between east and west, its merchants eagerly importing pepper, cinnamon, fine silks, and increasingly indigo. To Venetian nobility and foreign diplomats, the dye represented luxury. Its deep, rich tones surpassed the faded grey blues of woad, the native European dye that had dominated the continent for centuries. Indigo's staying power and brilliance made it irresistible for textiles destined for ecclesiastical garments, noble finery, and carnival robes. The Catholic Church itself coveted the color, associating it with heaven, humility, and celestial grace. But with its brilliance came resistance. The powerful wool and dyers' guilds in Venice and Florence had long held monopolies over European dye production. Indigo, imported and foreign, threatened their livelihood. Whispers of its dominance spurred calls to ban or restrict its use. It was labeled an intruder, illegitimate, even corrosive to tradition. In some quarters, its use was quietly forbidden. Its merchants watched with suspicion. Yet, as with all things rare and beautiful, prohibition only heightened demand. To understand indigo in Venice, then, is to understand a paradox. A city built on trade, fearful of transformation. A color both sacred and seditious. And a merchant Tamil, sea-worn and blue-fingered, at the center of it all. By the time the sun tilts westward, you found your rhythm in Venice. Mornings spent in the fondaco cataloguing your wares, afternoons lost in a haze of market noise and canal song. The dyes are tucked safely into wooden chests, the spices stored in small ceramic jars. You think yourself unnoticed, but of course nothing blue goes unseen here. A scroll arrives, tied with burgundy ribbon, stamped not with the crest, but the pressed seal of the Wool and Dyers Guild. You run your fingers over the wax. The message is more scent than ink, a whisper of cloves, sandalwood, and waxy parchment. The kind of note that makes a merchant curious. The meeting is held at a modest shop tucked behind the arsenal, where sails flap like bird wings and oars clatter like bones. The shop smells of beeswax, musk, and salt. The scent of cloth ships from 100 harbors. The owner of the shop, a fabric merchant and guild affiliate, is waiting with a crooked grin and hands still dusty from counting coin. His wife offers you a small glass of pear vinegar, which she insists helps with digestion and diplomacy. You sip, unsure about either. The merchant is tall and sturdy, with the kind of build shaped by years of hauling bales of fabric and gesturing through heated negotiations. His dark curls spill from beneath a felted cap, dyed a muted plum, and his doublet, of forest green wool trimmed with simple embroidery, bears the faint scent of dye vats and sea salt. The fabric is fine but practical, his cuffs ink-smudged from tallying shipments, his boots softened by the city's worn stones. His presence is warm, his humor easy, an honest man who knows the value of both linen and laughter. You notice that his wife, by contrast, moves with the poise of someone used to balancing ledgers and linens with equal skill. Her gown is a soft blue-gray wool, dyed with woad and sun-faded at the seams, practical but tailored just enough to hint at her husband's trade. A hand-stitched linen veil frames her face, and her sleeves are edged with fine embroidery, the sort only a merchant's wife with discerning fingers might attempt herself. At her hip, a leather pouch jingles with keys and coin, and when she smiles, it's with the quiet amusement of someone who's seen men bluff over velvet and lose over lace. The room bursts with textiles, Venetian velvets, coarse wools from the north, silk linings from Florence. They ask to see your sandalwood, your turmeric, your cardamom pods. The merchant holds a turmeric root to the light like it's a jewel. His wife insists the scent of sandalwood reminds her of church incense and rainy nights. But more honest, she adds with a wink. In return, they show you a bolt of crimson brocade imported from Lucca, thick with golden embroidery. The merchant explains the difficulty of sourcing cochineal from Spain, while his wife complains good Florentine weavers are becoming as arrogant as painters. You laugh, admitting you've heard similar things about Kanchipuram silk dyers, who believe their cloth has divine approval. They're fascinated by the methods of your indigo dyeing, the fermentation, the leaf paste, the drying racks stretching like vineyards under monsoon skies. In turn, you're curious about their guild practices. The merchant mimics the posture of a particularly pompous dye inspector, puffing out his chest and declaring in mock Latin that your indigo would cause moral disorder. His wife, scandalized, asks whether you've ever dyed anything with elephant urine, which she read in a traveler's tale and immediately regretted believing. You shake your head in amusement. Between laughter and questions, The conversation slows and figs are passed around. The merchant's tone softens. "A bishop's steward has heard of your cloth," he says. "A noblewoman too. The word is spreading, and he has been asked to pass on a formal invitation to meet with a guild of Venetian textile buyers interested in purchasing your dyes. But before such matters unfold, he and his wife insist, firmly and fondly, that you join them at dinner tomorrow night with some other traders, not just to trade, but to talk, to eat, to listen." The merchant's wife raises a brow. "Besides," she says with a smirk, "we thought you might like a taste of Venetian gossip. It pairs well with chickpeas." You agree. The day has brought something rare, not just business, but friendship. In the labyrinth of canals and marketplaces that formed 15th century Venice, color was commerce, and commerce was tightly controlled. Behind the opulence of damask curtains, brocaded surcoats, and ecclesiastical robes lay a powerful regulatory system of guilds, known locally as arti. These weren't casual collectives of craftsmen. They were highly organized institutions that governed the economic and social life of the Republic. The Arte dei Tintori, the Dyers Guild, was among the most powerful. Established by the 13th century, it dictated everything from who could work with particular dyes, to how fabrics should be treated, to which families held exclusive rights to certain color recipes. Guild members had to complete long apprenticeships, pay dues, and adhere to trade laws enforced not only by civil authorities, but by guild elders. A breach of trust, such as undercutting prices or diluting dyes, could mean exile from the profession, or worse, public shame in the Banca dei Puniti, bench of the punished, a literal seat in the marketplace reserved for disgraced traders. Such strict oversight was not merely about craftsmanship. It was about economic survival. Venice's reputation as a textile capital depended on quality and consistency. And when indigo, a foreign import, began arriving in greater quantities via Levantine ports, guilds were quick to push back. Though indigo produced deeper, longer-lasting blues than the traditional woad, guado in Italian, it was cheaper, more efficient, and, most threatening, controlled by foreign traders outside guild hierarchies. This made indigo both desirable and dangerous. While noble clients and clergy quietly coveted its radiance, guild officials feared its destabilizing potential. Venice never formally banned indigo as Florence briefly did, but pressure mounted to label it substandard or illegal. It was often imported under euphemisms, tintura oriental or blue di Levante, and merchants dealing in it had to tread delicately, even while demand simmered just below the surface. In this environment, formal negotiations were rarely formal. While contracts were signed in ink, the real deals were often made around the dinner table. Feasting and hosting were core rituals of mercantile life. A well-placed meal could signal trust, initiate alliance, or serve as a trial period for deeper business dealings. Cenacoli, merchant suppers, were semi-private affairs that blurred social and commercial boundaries. Here, a merchant could meet guild members, nobles, buyers, and even rivals, all while sipping almond milk under frescoed ceilings. Women, while excluded from the guilds themselves, played critical roles in these negotiations. In elite and merchant households alike, wives were not silent observers. They handled correspondence, managed inventories, ran retail shops, and, crucially, facilitated introductions. Their knowledge of textiles, color, and taste trends gave them power in matters of soft diplomacy. Hosting salons, exchanging gifts, and steering conversation required tact, memory, and social grace. A well-placed word from a merchant's wife could mean the difference between a stalled deal and a royal commission. For a Tamil merchant bringing sandalwood and indigo across continents, success in Venice required more than fine goods. It required intuition, knowing how to read a laugh, when to offer a taste of cardamom, when to listen, and when to let silence say more than any contract ever could. In a city gilded by gold leaf and sea spray, trade was an art, and every dinner a brushstroke. That evening, Venice flickers. The sun has slipped behind its lacework skyline, and lanterns bob gently on moored boats as you follow the merchant and his wife into the merchant quarter. The air is thick with the scent of stewed garlic and salt, a breeze carrying the hush of tide water against stone. Your gondola rocks gently as you step onto the landing of the merchant's house, and it leans ever so slightly toward the canal, as if eavesdropping. It's a tall, narrow creature stitched between two others like a book on a crowded shelf. All of Venice is like this, elbow-to-elbow elegance rising straight out of water and resting on a forest of submerged wooden stilts. Some say entire Hungarian oak groves now sleep beneath the lagoon. The front door, the Porta d'Acqua, opens straight onto the canal, because in Venice, your most important guests arrive by boat, not by foot. This isn't a grand palazzo, but it isn't humble either. It belongs to a merchant, and in this city, that means everything. Riches don't hide in marble. They hide in dried figs from Smyrna, saffron from Kashmir, and crates of wool from Bruges. Inside, the ground floor smells of damp rope, wine, and last winter's mildew. It's built like a half-forgotten cellar, and for good reason. It floods with the tides. Venetians wisely keep their fine rugs, daughters, and fortunes on the upper floors. You climb the stone staircase, worn smooth by centuries of hustle. At the top, the piano nobile, the noble floor, where the ceiling lifts like a cathedral's, and sunlight pours through pointed arch windows, flooding the room with a kind of gilded confidence. These homes were built tall, not wide, because Venice is a city of tight spaces and wild ambitions. A Murano glass chandelier trembles ever so slightly in the breeze, delicate as a breath. It's made of spun sugar and secret recipes, from a glass blower's island where even the apprentices were once forbidden to leave, lest the recipe for Venetian glass escape across the sea. The walls are painted with sea monsters, saints, and sailing ships, and below them, a carved table is littered with the debris of a working life: scrolls, peppercorns, a small silver scale, and a Turkish inkwell. Trade happens here, not just with ledgers and seals, but with glances, rumors, and wine. A cistern sits in the courtyard, hidden behind a stone grill, fed by rainwater channeled from red-tiled rooftops. There's no river in Venice, no wellspring, just rain, sand, and patience. The water tastes faintly of stone and salt. You realize this home is not just a house. It's a vault of cleverness, compromise, and centuries of salt-soaked history, stacked 3 floors high, clinging to a sliver of stone between sky and sea. The light is soft and golden as it slips through the narrow windows of the merchant's dining hall, filtering through lace curtains and glinting off polished brass cups. A long walnut table stretches beneath an arched ceiling, groaning under the weight of dishes that smell of smoke, spice, and stories. To your left, A Persian trader in a green turban is unwrapping a parcel of dried rose petals and saffron threads, his hands soft with spice dust. Opposite him, a heavy-set Egyptian merchant carves slices of soft white cheese and places them onto rounds of fig-stuffed flatbread. A Tamil broker you once met in Aden arrives late, smelling faintly of ship's salt and sesame oil, offering black cardamom from his coat as if it were currency. Your merchant acquaintance beams with delight as he accepts it and deposits a sprig of rosemary in return. For meat or mischief, he jokes, and the room hums with amusement. There is no fixed tongue at the table, only a river of words drifting between Arabic, Persian, Italian, and Tamil. You follow with ease, as you always have, your ear tuned to the music of the market. The meal arrives in stages, bowls of lentil stew spiced with cumin and long pepper, roasted chickpea cakes served with vinegar-soaked onions, unleavened rice breads folded like crescent moons, figs soaked in wine until they bleed sweetly onto the wooden plates. Someone passes you a dish of bitter greens sautéed in olive oil and claps his chest as if warning a cure for a merchant's stomach or its ruin. You speak of spices and trade routes, yes, but also of rain, of cookpots that hiss over coals in Tamil Nadu and in Cairo, of a particular red lentil that never softens unless scalded twice with boiling water. Laughter follows in all languages. Between second and third servings, the talk turns serious. Well, as serious as talk can be between mouthfuls of honeyed almonds and vinegar-roasted dates. The Persian trader spoke of a sudden surge in saffron prices after droughts in Khorasan. The Egyptian perfumer whispered that rose water had gone scarce in the Levant, but cedar oil was abundant along the coast. A seasoned Armenian cloth dealer recounted how a shipment of silk had been waylaid by snow in the Balkans, and how demand had spiked as a result. The wife of the merchant chimed in with news that a Venetian noblewoman had commissioned a gown in indigo silk, a quiet signal that fashion might soon shift. The Tamil merchant, in turn, offered a warning. A beetle blight was affecting turmeric yields in Malabar. No scroll or guild decree could offer such immediacy. Here, over wine and woven stories, merchants mapped out the pulse of the world, not in ink, but in conversation. Later, as platters were cleared and the wine deepened in color, the talk turned to Venice itself and how to approach guilds when making delicate trades. The Egyptian trader with a beard like a waterfall laughed and said, "Treat it like a marriage proposal. Too bold, and they'll say no just to prove they can." A Greek dealer of pigments added that guilds did not respect strangers, but they adored rumors. "Let them hear of your indigo from someone else's lips first," she advised. "Let them want to be curious." You listened, struck not by formality, but by performance. Venice was not a place of blunt offers. It was a theater of layered gestures, where patience, scarcity, and well-placed whispers were worth more than gold. You watched the flicker of candles, the gleam of oil on bread, the languages melting into each other. These are your people, you think, not because you share a land, but because you share the instinct to trade, to taste, to listen. Here, among spices and secrets, the world is not divided. It is braided, folded into stew, pressed between pages, sipped and remembered. In 15th century Venice, a dinner table could map the world. The Republic was a cosmopolitan crossroad, its markets swollen with spices from the east, citrus from North Africa, wines from Greece, and game from the Venetian hinterlands. food was not merely sustenance, it was diplomacy, ritual, and storytelling, especially when shared between merchants of different tongues. The Venetians, known for their resourceful kitchens, relied heavily on legumes, grains, cured fish, garlic, chickpeas, and bitter greens. Meat was a luxury, more often preserved than fresh. Sugar, still a novelty, was beginning to appear in elite households, often imported from Cyprus or Egypt. Local dishes included panisia, a rustic rice stew, fried artichokes, and ketsi fritti, chickpea fritters spiced with vinegar and pepper. They baked breads sweetened with figs or dates and preserved lemons and olives in brine and oil. The Persians, arriving by way of overland caravans or via Alexandria and Aleppo, brought dried fruits, rosewater, pistachios, saffron, and pomegranate molasses. Persian cuisine emphasized the balancing of hot and cold foods, as per humoral theory, and their culinary sophistication was legendary in the medieval Islamic world. Stews rich in herbs, flatbreads like naan-e-barbari, and sweet rice dishes flavored with cardamom or orange peel were commonly enjoyed. Egyptian merchants, particularly from Cairo and Alexandria, dealt in salted fish, cheese, dates, sesame oil, and lentils. Egyptian cuisine blended Arabic, Berber, and Coptic influences. Dishes such as ful medames, slow-cooked fava beans, dukka, a spice and nut dip, and citrus pickled vegetables were staples. From Egypt also came techniques for preserving food during long desert journeys, essential for overland traders. As a merchant from the Coromandel coast, you would have been raised on a diet of rice, tamarind, lentils, black pepper, coconut, and jaggery. In the ports of Kayal, Nagapattinam, and Karaikal, spices like cardamom and turmeric were packed in oiled cloth or banana leaves and loaded onto ships alongside dried red chilies, sandalwood, and woven cotton cloths. Tamil cooking relied heavily on aromatic stews, kutu, sambar, and roasted legumes, and featured rice breads and lentil fritters that traveled well on long voyages. At gatherings like the one described, meals were less about fusion and more about presentation and exchange. Each merchant would bring a specialty, an oil, a preserved lemon, a root or bean not known to the others. And in the communal act of tasting, a subtle diplomacy unfolded. Culinary curiosity served as a bridge across difference. One might not speak perfect Arabic, but everyone could understand the pleasure of a sweet fig or a warm stew. Venice's kitchens, though deeply local, absorbed influence by osmosis. Over time, imported spices changed the city's palate. Pepper became common enough to be stored in spice cabinets across the lagoon. Saffron gilded rice in noble homes, and preserved lemons, originally a Levantine curiosity, slowly found their way into Venetian fish stews. These meals, semi-formal and highly sensory, served as soft entry points for harder negotiations. When language failed, a shared bite often succeeded. After all, a merchant who offers his best spice in good faith is rarely refused a hearing, and laughter shared over lentils tends to linger longer than any paper contract. The meeting takes place at dusk the next day, in a back chamber of the Dyers Guild near San Zan d'Egola, a modest building, but thick with the scent of boiled cloth and mordant. The ceiling is arched in timber, the light filtered through sheets of oiled linen. A note from your merchant acquaintance had been clear. It will be a quiet gathering. Bring your best blue. So you do, tucked in a lacquered case, folded between layers of muslin like a relic. The merchant's wife waits just beyond the door, dressed plainly but with a coral pendant looped at her neck, a small, glinting reassurance. She nods once as you pass, eyes warm but alert. She will not attend the discussion, but her presence confirms you are not walking into a trap. Inside, 5 men stand around a long table. They are dyers by trade, but negotiators by necessity. Their robes are modest but crisp, dyed in the city's proudest blue, woad. Their expressions unreadable. On the surface, they are courteous. But beneath that civility lies calculation. They had heard of him, of course, long before the sandalwood shipment was registered or the first cloth bolt was unpacked. Whispers had travelled faster than gondolas. A Tamil merchant with cakes of a dye deeper than twilight. Not woad, not from Europe. Indigo. Rich, foreign, threatening. For the guild, it was not merely a matter of colour. It was economics, hierarchy, the integrity of craft. Woad was grown, harvested, and processed across the countryside by thousands. To allow indigo in too freely was to risk those livelihoods and their own authority. They asked careful questions, not about price, but about method. Not about how it looked, but how it would last. You unfold the cloth slowly. The silk is soaked in your deepest vat dye. The indigo so rich it appears almost black in the dim lamplight. But when the flame catches the fabric just right, the blue flares like sunlit water, like midnight lacquer. The dyers lean forward, and though they do not speak, something shifts in the room. They ask technical questions, how it binds, how it fades, what plant it comes from. You answer sparingly. Your aim is not to teach, but to tempt. Then comes the matter of exchange. They offer coin, naturally, and a small shipment of alum. Others suggest coral or dyed wool bolts in Venetian patterns. You shake your head gently. Coin corrodes. Coral crumbles. You are not here for trinkets. You are here for knowledge and tools. You ask for blown glass beads, colored and cut for export, not yet valuable in Venice, but near magical in Southeast Asia. And iron tools, chisels and hinges of Venetian make, renowned in your homeland for their sharpness and endurance. But more than anything, you ask for maps. The kind not sold in markets, annotated with trade routes beyond the Pillars of Hercules. One guild member bristles. Maps are power. There is a pause, longer than is polite. One of the dyers murmurs something in Venetian, and another replies in Tuscan. Words not meant for you, but you catch their shape. Too clever for a spice man, one says. But eventually, they agree. The indigo is taken, but not praised. The beads and metal are packed in silence. A scroll tube, cracked and worn, is passed to you last. The paper inside is lined with ocean paths and red-inked notations. The Venetian master with the clipped beard clears his throat, not rudely, but with ceremony. He gestures for the notary, who unrolls a parchment document and begins reading aloud in slow, deliberate Italian. Though the merchant cannot follow every word, he watches the faces carefully. No signs of hesitation now. The terms are simple and by Venetian standards, fair. In exchange for 2 full crates of indigo, the merchant will receive a folio of hand-drawn maritime charts. One shows the coastlines of Sicily and Malta. Another, more precious, maps the trade routes between Alexandria, Rhodes, and Constantinople, annotated in red ink and the tiny Latin. The guild masters sign first, their names written in looping flourishes. The notary dries the ink with a sprinkle of fine ash. Then it is the merchant's turn. He presses his seal beside theirs, a circular stamp carved with the image of a conch shell, and a Tamil script mark for his port city. A second contract is signed in mirror. one for each party. As the scrolls are handed over, tied with twine and stamped again with hot wax, there's a brief pause. One of the older guild members, leaning on a carved cane, remarks, almost to himself, that blue this pure has not been seen in Venice since the Levantine ships stopped coming. You incline your head slightly, a faint smile forming. It's not the words, but the weight of them that matters. You tuck the rolled parchment under your arm. The maps are yours now, and in return, Venice will wear your blue. The guild's seal still felt warm through the parchment as you stepped away from the hall, its wax fresh, its weight curiously satisfying. The trade had been struck, your Indigo, for something far more ephemeral, yet equally priceless: knowledge. The merchant had also made the case on your behalf behind the scenes, not just as an ally, but as someone who saw your arrival not as threat, but as spark. And now, as the shadows lengthened across the Grand Canal, he had something else in mind. "Come," his wife had said gently, placing a hand on your arm with the ease of a friend. "Let the water carry us a while." The gondola rocked gently beneath you, its black hull cutting through the canal like a calligrapher's pen across parchment. It was dusk, and Venice had begun its nightly transformation. Stones softened into silhouette, voices thinned into echoes, and the scent of the sea rose sharper in the cooling air. The oarsman stood barefoot at the stern, his striped shirt loose in the breeze, long strokes guiding the vessel past facades, crumbling with grace, and balconies weighed down by geraniums. You sat under a striped canopy beside the merchant and his wife, velvet cushions creaking under the slow shift of movement. The boat glided past other gondolas, some piled high with bolts of crimson wool, others ferrying veiled noblewomen who fanned themselves with brocade handkerchiefs. Somewhere ahead, the faint strains of a lute danced across the water, dinner music from a palazzo's upper floor. Gondolas had once been private symbols of wealth and rivalry, their embellishments flaunted by the elite. But by the early 15th century, Venice had tamed their grandeur with regulation. All gondolas were now painted the same austere black, an equalizing act by decree, though artisans still left their subtle fingerprints in carvings, scrollwork, and choice of upholstery. Reserved for the city's rituals and its secrets, a gondola was not simply a ride. It was a stage, a whisper, a lull between negotiations. Tonight, it felt like a benediction. The merchant stretched one leg lazily, his boot brushing the hem of his wife's gown, dyed, you noticed, with a faint blue sheen. He had vouched for you before the guild, not because he pitied you, but because he understood potential. He spoke in numbers and pigments, but beneath it all was a belief that your dyes could stir more than cloth. They could open the eyes of artists, of nobles, of the world. He saw, perhaps more clearly than others, that commerce wasn't a tide to resist. It was a current to ride. Their laughter flowed like the canal itself. She teased him about his growing obsession with Tamil silks. He countered with tales of his first failed trade in Alexandria. You found yourself laughing, not out of politeness, but from something deeper. Shared survival, shared folly. Eventually, the conversation turned to the scroll now resting beside you, bound in twine, edged in gold. The maps. The merchant's wife tilted her head and asked with quiet curiosity why a merchant from the Coromandel coast would prize Venetian charts above coin. You told them that Venetian maps weren't just drawings, they were living archives. Crafted from centuries of seafaring lore, updated from whispers in docks and courts, they showed not just coastlines, but winds, tides, and even port taxes. For you, they held the promise of safer routes, earlier arrivals, and leverage in lands where knowledge meant access. They were, in truth, among the rarest things a merchant could carry home. Back home, you were taught to trust the stars and the rhythm of the monsoon winds. Here, cartography is its own language, scripted in compass roses, latticed with lines like spider silk, and bristling with the secrets of empire. You've seen charts before, scratched onto palm leaves and handed down by elders who memorized the pull of tides. But nothing like this. These maps pulse with the fingerprints of the known world. They're born of long nights in candle-lit counting houses and stories traded over cups of strong wine. They chart not only land and sea, but danger and opportunity. Where corsairs from Tunis wait in spring, where Portuguese tariffs have begun to bite, where a shoal swallowed 2 ships last Lent. You can almost smell the smoke-stained parchment, feel the notches etched along the margins, measurements of trust, not just distance. These are not maps given lightly. The guilds guard them with a jealousy bordering on reverence. Some charts have never left Venice, passed only from father to son, or shared with Ottoman traders under strict promises inked in both blood and wax. That they gave one to you, a foreigner, an Indian, a Tamil, is something that would cause quiet murmurs in the Rialto's shadowy corners. But you understand why they did. Your indigo has shaken the dye guild's monopoly. Your spices opened new appetites. And Venice, for all her pride, is always hungry for profit. By placing a map in your hands, they're not simply rewarding a merchant, they're investing in a bridge between worlds. The guilds wager that you will return. That next time, you will bring not just pepper and silk, but knowledge of your own. For you, the chart is not a trophy. It's a tool, a compass, through conversations with Arabian brokers, a bribe for access in a busy African port, a way to arrive early to a market before the Dutch even hear of it. You roll it carefully, not just to protect the parchment, but to hold close the thing it represents. Direction, possibility, power. The merchant nodded, his expression thoughtful beneath the lantern's flicker. He added that the charts had once been guarded like relics, compiled from stolen Arabic manuals, papal expedition logs, even sketches traded in backroom deals. That they had entrusted one to you said something unspoken. The guild had not given you charity, they had made a wager. As the gondola turned beneath a low stone bridge and the first stars winked over the lagoon, you understood what you now held. Not just a map, but a mirror, a way to see where you'd been and imagine where you might go. And beneath the soft hush of ore in water, you exhaled into the Venetian night. You stand once more at the steps of your lodgings, the Fondaco dei Turci, where salt clings to the stone and the air still smells faintly of saffron and wood smoke. Behind you, the Grand Canal is quieter now, its waters black and glassy, stirred only by the gentle push of a late gondola and the far-off trill of a nightbird. The merchant and his wife linger beside you, their faces half lit by the flame of an iron lantern fixed to the wall. The merchant clasps your forearm with both hands, firm, warm, like an anchor. His eyes carry that same glint they held when he first inspected your indigo under a market awning. A spark of curiosity, but now mingled with trust. He tells you, in his lilting Venetian cadence, that trade is never only about goods. It's about people, about the hands behind the fabric and the stories behind the scent. Beside him, his wife gently adjusts your sash, as if brushing away a wrinkle, though it's more a gesture of care than necessity. She speaks of the scent of sandalwood that now lingers in their home, of how their servants are beginning to ask where to find peppercorns shaped like tiny chess pieces. Her voice is fond, her laughter soft. She says the house will feel quieter without your tales. The moment holds. You bow your head slightly, not in deference, but in something deeper. Recognition. Friendship earned over bowls of spiced stew and shared mistakes. Over candlelight and the sound of fabric being unfurled on market tables. The merchant taps the side of the scroll case you now carry strapped to your back, the Venetian map given in trade, and nods once, as if to say, take care where you sail, but go. You part without fanfare, no final toast, no elaborate embrace, just the creak of your sandals on the stone steps, the ripple of water, and the hush of night settling around the city. Inside your chamber, the silence is wide and night returns to Venice, cloaking its domes and bridges in a milky hush. The shutters are drawn against the breeze, and your ledger lies open beside a flickering oil lamp. Tonight, you're not counting profit or listing ship cargo. Tonight, you're watching the moon. On a small table rests your navigational calendar, a blend of Tamil astrological almanac and practical weather wisdom. You trace the notches carved into its surface, tides, winds, lunar positions, and that most important of markers, the arrival of the monsoon. Timing the return voyage is delicate. Miss the winds, and your ship could languish for weeks in the wrong sea, rations dwindling, sails slack. Catch them just right, and the currents will carry you home like a song hummed by the ocean. You're almost finished when you hear a soft creak just outside the open door. Someone lingers in the corridor. You glance up, and a young man, no older than 20, leans against the doorway, holding a half-eaten pear in one hand and blinking as though he's been up reading by candlelight too long. He's not a merchant, more likely a scribe or apprentice to one of the Venetian notaries. His tunic is ink-stained, the sleeves pushed up, hair a little wild. He nods at the map in bewilderment. How you can read the sky not to divine omens, but to calculate real-world shipping deadlines. He gestures to your palm leaf charts with a kind of reverent confusion. Do the stars speak your tongue? You smile and explain gently. The stars don't speak, but they shine with rhythm. Your calendar is older than some cities. Generations of Tamil traders have passed down knowledge of how the southwest monsoon sweeps across the Arabian Sea between May and September, filling sails and hearts with hope. You remember your father's stories, how in Nagapattinam, port bells would ring to signal the arrival of the first strong winds. Ships would groan as they were loaded with sacks of pepper, bundles of cloth, and jars of sweet sour pickles sealed with wax. Men would speak of the coming rains like they spoke of gods, powerful, generous, and impossible to bribe. You dip your pen and record the wind's scent tonight. Smells of olives, sea brine, and drying hemp. You note the position of the moon, waxing gibbous, and how it reflects like silver coinage on the canal below. Your mind turns to the loading of your ship and to home, somewhere beyond this city of bells and tides. Women in your village sweep the courtyards, and your son, if he's awake, watches the same moon. One day, perhaps, he'll learn this lunar dance too. Historians suggest that long before longitude was measured or compasses drawn with precision on European maps, Tamil and Indian Ocean merchants were navigating vast distances using time as their compass. While Venetian maps were instruments of commerce and control, charting coastlines, ports, and taxes with remarkable precision. A Tamil merchant's calendar was a living guide rooted in the rhythms of nature. Where the Venetian relied on compass and ink to claim new markets, the Tamil trader turned to lunar cycles, monsoon patterns, and ancestral knowledge to read the sea and decide when to sail. And for Indian Ocean merchants, the monsoon wasn't just a season, it was a lifeline. The term monsoon comes from the Arabic word mausim, meaning season, which reflects how integral this wind system was to commerce between East Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, India, and Southeast Asia. The southwest monsoon, blowing from May to September, would push ships westward from India toward the Red Sea and Persian Gulf. Its counterpart, the northeast monsoon, blew from November to February, aiding return voyages. Tamil merchants from coastal ports had long mastered the timing of these winds. Even by the first millennium CE, the Chola Empire had mapped seasonal cycles into detailed trade calendars. These were not crude tools. They combined observational astronomy, oral tradition, and even poetic references to wind behavior. Palm leaf manuscripts and oral instructions handed down within trading guilds, like the Ainuruva and the Manigramam, carried centuries of wisdom. When trading as far as Venice or Egypt, Tamil merchants relied not just on their own calculations, but on embedded relationships in port cities, Muslim, Jewish, and sometimes even Italian partners who knew when to expect the spice ships. The need for precise scheduling became even more critical as cargoes diversified. Indigo, cardamom, muslin, dyes, and even perishables like ghee or dried fruits. While European traders were more reliant on coastal sailing and Mediterranean routes, South Indian navigators had to deal with the full force of the open ocean. They developed large ships with flexible rigging and special hull designs. Crews learned how to read the sky, smell for humidity shifts, and watch the color of water to anticipate currents. What makes this system remarkable is its age. Indian use of the monsoon winds was recorded as far back as the 1st century CE, and Tamil sources had referenced them even earlier in Sangam poetry. The fact that these patterns remained stable enough to rely on for generations allowed for predictable cycles of trade, social exchange, and return. So in that quiet room beside a Venetian canal, you aren't dreaming with his charts. You're participating in one of the world's oldest maritime traditions. The next morning, long before the bells of San Marco call the city awake, your ship pulls away from the dock, its oars dipping silently into the blue-gray waters of the lagoon. Venice recedes like a fading mirage, its towers softened by the morning mist, its marble skin brushed with the pale light of dawn. Behind you, the lanterns along the canal still flicker, their flames stubborn in the hush before sunrise. You stand at the stern, wrapped in a shawl that still carries the faint scent of saffron and salt. In your hands, a roll of parchment, one of Venice's prized maps, rests beside your old calendar of stars and tides. You glance from one to the other, knowing they will sit side by side in your chest, two ways of reading the world, one shaped by ink and trade winds, the other by moonlight and memory. Your fingers still bear the faint stain of indigo. Not just a dye, you think, but a thread woven now through the fabrics of two worlds. The trade you made was not just of goods, but of trust. You came with silence and color, and left with voices, questions, and direction. As gulls wheel overhead, your thoughts drift toward home. The smell of tamarind cooking on a hearth, the dry crackle of banana leaves wrapping your wares, the soft echo of conch shells at morning puja. But there is something else too, an ember of future possibility. New harbors, new stories. The ship finds its rhythm beneath you, creaking softly as the sails billow. The sea opens wide, and the horizon stretches like a scroll yet to be written. You've made your mark, with ink, with color, and with silence. And now, it is time to rest. So take a slow breath, dear traveler. Let the sails hold you. Let the sea rock you. Let the map dream for you. You are between worlds now, and that is the perfect place to sleep.